Hello, and welcome to today's episode. I am joined by Rosemary McGuire Berry, and she is the author of a new book called Piety and Personality: The Temperaments of the Saints. And for anyone who's ever been curious about their own temperament style or just what the saints were like and what their personality styles were, this is actually the book for you. And when I first started reading this, I knew just a little bit about temperaments. I knew they were out there, and I was like, how do you pronounce it? Choleric, phlegmatic? I don't even know. But by the end of the book, I was just so inspired by the fact that God has made us in such unique ways, and that I don't have to be a saint exactly like Thomas Aquinas or Saint Mary Magdalene. That God has created us in unique ways, and that He desires our holiness, and He just wants us to be ourselves. So that was my big takeaway from your book, Rosemary. But welcome, and I'm just so excited to just talk about this book with you, and just even to learn more about you and what led you to write this book. So welcome.
Thank you so much, Valentina, and thank you for explaining what you liked about the book. That's really awesome. So I am a wife and a mom, a lifelong Catholic by the grace of God, and I am an author, a speaker, and a pilgrimage planner. I live in a house full of vintage Catholic books, so I feel a little bit of a responsibility to use those Catholic books to find the nuggets and share them with the world. But particularly my mission is to tell the stories of the saints so that we can walk with them by reading, by prayer, by imitation, and by going on pilgrimage, all so that we can grow closer to the heart of Christ.
So when you were a child, were you just drawn to the lives of the saints, or what first piqued your interest in that area?
I was. I think I'm very drawn to story. I mean, many of us are, but I particularly liked reading the stories of the saints. And as time grew, as I grew and as time went on, I would read more and more. And I realized that although we need to read the spiritual books, the ones that just talk about the soul as a thing, I was much more inspired by the stories of the saints where I could see them putting it into action. And I had a spiritual director tell me, you got to balance it out. You got to read some that, are about how the soul works and then read the story ones. I'm like, yeah, I know. So in this book, I was able to take my love of the stories of the saints, make them come to life, make them like friends. That's how I want to do it. I want to connect people with the saints so that we can imitate them. If all you think of is saints are up here on a pedestal and they're meditating for hours and they're having visions and they're doing austere penances that we couldn't even dream of, we're not going to connect with them and we're not going to try to imitate them. On the other side, if we're just looking at the life of Christ, sometimes we can say, well, I want to be Christ-like, but how exactly do I apply that to my life when I have 8 kids? Or being married at all, or whatever it is, taking care of an aged relative. We can try to guess what Christ would do, but if we look at the lives of the saints, we can see Christ's example in them, shining through them.
Yes. So, gosh, as you were talking, I was reminded of some of the stories you shared for example, Saint Francis de Sales, and how he learned to control his temper, and that he was, what was the word he used? He was very meek. So, could you just share his story a little bit? I'm sure many are aware of his story, but just would love for you to just share that and how he he grew in that virtue of meekness.
Yes. So he's one of my favorites. He's the patron saint of writers. So he's my patron saint.
Ah.
And a lot of us have heard his name, but may not know his story. So he lived in the late 1500s into the early 1600s, which was a busy time in the church. There was a lot going on. The Protestants had just broken away from the church. There was in that 100 years there, from the early 1500s to the early 1600s, a lot was happening in the church. It was in great turmoil. We had the Jansenists who were trying to tell us that there should not be any lovingness or sentiment about our love of God, and that we shouldn't go to communion very often. And then we had the Protestants who were rocking the foundations of the church in so many ways. And here comes St. Francis de Sales through all of that. And he had a very strong personality himself. He was choleric and melancholic, which the cholerics are the bossy ones, the dominant ones, the ones who know where they're going in life, the CEOs. And the melancholics are the ones that are very detail oriented and want to do everything just right. and our perfectionists and idealists. So you can imagine that both of those in his personality meant that he could go places. He could make a big wave in the world that he was in. And his dad sent him off to legal school. He had an idea that he should be a lawyer and a statesman. And so St. Francis de Sales went to Rome and Padua and studied, and he discerned that he had a religious vocation. So he used all of that education to become a very skilled orator. His sermons were just amazing, and they drew crowds. And then he began to write as well, and he wrote the beautiful Introduction to the Devout Life. But for the purposes of the book, I focused in on how he used the strengths of being a choleric and a melancholic to overcome the weaknesses of being a choleric and a melancholic. So maybe it's obvious, but cholerics can struggle with bossiness and temper and railroading people and that kind of stuff. And melancholics can deal with depression and discouragement and feeling like just nothing ever goes the way I had planned. They can become Eeyores if they're not careful. So we don't see any of that in the life of St. Francis de Sales because he overcame it. He used that decisiveness and he used that attention to detail to overcome his weaknesses by saying, I'm going to make a list, for example, when he was a legal student at Padua. I'm going to make a list of the things that I need to work on and exactly how I'm going to work on them. And then he carried out that plan with that choleric, sticking to the goal. And so he gives us this beautiful example. Sorry, my doorbell just rang. This beautiful example of overcoming our weaknesses by using the strengths that God gave us.
Yes. And so you just began to touch on just the different temperament styles. Can you share a little bit more about the other styles for those who may not be aware?
Absolutely. So first of all, Hippocrates came up with this in the 4th century before Christ, which is why the names are kind of peculiar to our modern ear. The cholerics, as I said, are the dominant ones. The melancholics are the detail ones. And then we have the sanguines, which are the very outgoing, friendly, positive, popular. That's your sanguine. But they have to watch out because they can be inconsistent and wishy-washy and have great ideas and great goals and great resolutions and not carry through on any of them. So that's what the sanguine is to watch out for. And then we have the phlegmatics, and they're the peaceful ones, the calm ones, the ones that just look for peace. They don't want conflict. They don't want to stand up and have a debate. They're just like, what difference does it make? That we can just do it your way. So again, that's got positives and negatives. It's good that they avoid conflict, but sometimes we have to stand up for our faith, for our family, for our spouse, whatever it is. Sometimes we have to stand up and be counted. So that's kind of a very quick overview of all 4.
So I have to ask, Rosemary, what is your temperament style, or what are your temperament styles?
So sanguine is my first, the outgoing, positive one, the one that sees the best in people and, just very optimistic. And then my second one is actually the melancholic, which is the detail-oriented one. So for example, when I'm about to give a public speech, my melancholic is making notes and getting stressed and getting all ready. And then when I step out onto the stage, my sanguine comes out, and then I'm happy and I'm talking and I'm engaging and all those things. So I have to work on the weaknesses of both while leaning into the strengths of both.
Yes. No, that makes sense. As I was reading the book, actually, I don't know, does it matter the order that it is? Because I think I'm melancholic sanguine or sanguine melancholic as well.
Yes. Usually you just say the first one that you have more of. So if you are more melancholic, then you would say melancholic sanguine.
Got it. Okay. Then that's the order. And so as I was reading this, right before this recording, I shared with my husband this particular chapter you wrote about St. Thomas Aquinas. And I was like, honey, this is you. I'm trying to figure out your personality ever since we got married, and this is you. And I mean, he's not a complete phlegmatic, but I think he has a mixture of choleric as well, which makes for an interesting combination.
Yeah.
But it was so helpful to learn to better understand him and to see his reactions. And it's like, oh, this is why you behave in certain ways, or because he's brilliant. And I'm not just saying that because he's my husband, but he's witty and he's very quiet. He's very much like Saint Joseph, but then he'll just come up with these zingers. And I'm like, where did
Yes.
this come from? But I'd
Yes.
love for you to share the story of St. Thomas Aquinas because I did not know a lot about his background. And he has
Yes.
such a
Yes.
fascinating story.
He does. He does. And I think that's one of the best things about learning about the temperaments is being able to go, aha, I know someone like that. I know I understand where they're coming from. So St. Thomas Aquinas was entrusted to the Benedictines when he was only 6 years old to be educated. And his choleric family expected him to become one of the greatest Benedictines and eventually rule the abbey at Monte Cassino, which of course was St. Benedict's monastery. And so this would be a position of prestige and importance and all those things. Well, St. Thomas Aquinas did very well in the school there because his peaceful nature fit really well with the work and pray attitude of the Benedictines. The peaceful schedules and all of that worked really well for him. But he also gained a lot of benefit there because they taught him to work and pray. Phlegmatics can sometimes be lazy and be so avoiding of conflict that it's like, it's too much trouble to get off the sofa. I'll just stay here. So they taught him to work and pray, and he jumped right into that. And so as he got older, he decided that he wanted to join the newfangled order of Dominicans, which were very new in the 1200s. And his family did not want him to become a Dominican. They wanted him to become a Benedictine. So when he tried to join, they came along and kidnapped him, beat him up, and locked him in a tower and said, you'll stay here until you come to your senses. Well, phlegmatics have a quiet stubbornness where they don't have to argue with you. They just won't do what you say. So if you have a phlegmatic toddler, they may go, and then not do it. They may not go pick up their toys or they may not go to bed when they're told, but they won't fight with you. They won't throw a tantrum. They'll just not do it. So phlegmatic Thomas was locked in his tower and he just decided he's not going to do it. I feel called to become a Dominican. I'm not going to do what they say. So he stayed there for 2 years in this tower. Well, at one point they tried to send in, let's just say, a disreputable woman to come in and tempt him away from his vocation. And that's when he came to life. That's when he grabbed a burning torch out of the fireplace and chased her out of the room. Then he went right back to praying again and being quiet and being peaceful and all of that. So eventually his sisters helped him to escape from the tower, and he was able to run away and become a Dominican. He studied under the great St. Albert the Great, and when he was in class, once again, he showed his phlegmatic nature because he was very quiet in class. And the one that's quiet is not usually who you think of as the head of the class. But who would doubt that St. Thomas Aquinas was the head of his class? But he was so quiet and so peaceful that his companions started calling him the dumb ox because they just thought, he's so stupid. He just sits there. He never says anything. He never joins in our student debates or anything. But St. Albert the Great could tell that Thomas was brilliant. And he told them that the bellowing from this dumb ox will be heard round the world. And sure enough, as Thomas grew into his vocation, he became a teacher at Naples, and eventually he started to write his Summa Theologica, which is just a masterpiece of Catholic theology. And I think it was the Council of Trent that when it was invoked, they put Thomas's writing alongside the Bible to be the two sources for the Council of Trent. I mean, that's big. That's really big.
Yes, and even you mentioned in the book, and I didn't realize this, that he wrote the Tantum Ergo as well as several other classic
Yes.
hymns that are sung at Mass and even in adoration. And it's just, I'm like, wow, I had no idea. So,
Yes.
yeah,
Yes.
never underestimate the quiet ones.
Yes. Yes. And I find that encouraging, like there's no useless temperament. Obviously, we know as Catholics that every soul is precious, but even every temperament is precious, whether it's the quiet one, whether it's the bossy one, whether it's the one that's so silly and ditzy because they're sanguine. We all have importance and we all have a mission from God.
Yes. And a couple of things that I really appreciated about your book, Rosemary, were one of your couple of final chapters, one about joy and one about understanding sadness and how each temperament handles that. So, can you touch a little bit upon those two things?
Yes. So I think that discouragement and depression are the things that we struggle most with in the faith. Those are the things that we have to watch out the most for because it's a slippery slope, right? So in that chapter on discouragement and depression, I bring up some of the things that the saints have suggested to help us with that. And sometimes it's as practical as taking a bath or going for a walk, calling a friend, doing something to pull ourselves out of the negative thoughts. But when we look at the temperaments can actually give us some guideposts to figure out where the discouragement is coming from. Each temperament has its own particular pitfalls when it comes to discouragement and depression. And for the cholerics, again, they're the dominant ones, the decisive ones, the ones that want to be in charge, like St. Paul, St. Francis Xavier. And they can become very discouraged when things seem out of control, when they can't control what's happening to them. So it could be that they have cancer, it could be that their child made a bad decision, or whatever it is, it could be that makes them feel that they are out of control. They also get depressed when they don't feel appreciated. They want to have appreciation. They want to have people say, "Wow, you did a great job running that bake sale or that committee or whatever it is that they're in charge of." They want to have that appreciation. The sanguines, this is going to sound funny, but they actually get discouraged when life is no fun and there's nothing to look forward to. And people who are not sanguine can think that that means that they're immature. Like, life can't always be fun. We have to get on with life here. This is serious. But for a sanguine, they just need to have some kind of joy to look forward to. So whether it's turning on some music while they do their housework or knowing that on Saturday they're going to get to do something fun, they have to have something to look forward to and they have to find a way to make things fun. Obviously, there are going to be times when you just have stomach flu at your house and it's not going to be fun. But you know what? You could turn on a fun movie or fun music or call a friend and vent to them about what's going on at your house. But just find a way to reach out. And sanguines are also extroverted. So like cholerics. So both of them benefit from talking to a friend or getting together with someone. For the melancholics, they struggle with discouragement and depression the most because they are perfectionists and idealists, and they see that the world is not meeting their expectations. So they particularly have to watch out for slipping down that slippery slope into discouragement and depression because life isn't perfect and they're looking for perfect, right? So they kind of have to remind themselves of what is joyful, be grateful, focus on gratitude. Instead of looking at the 5 things that are going wrong, look at the 20 things that God blessed them with, So they have to watch out for that. And then with the phlegmatics, they actually get discouraged if there's stress and conflict. So if mommy and daddy aren't getting along, or they're having a problem with their mother-in-law, or whatever it is, if there's conflict and stress, that's going to depress the phlegmatic and make them withdraw into themselves. So they have to find ways to self-care. I'm going to go for a walk. I'm going to go take a nap. I'm going to talk to a friend before I talk to my mother-in-law. I'm just going to find ways to be understanding of my needs. And I'm sure that's something you talk about in your coaching is it's not that we're babying ourselves or making excuses for ourselves, but we have to bring in some self-care. Like, will it help if I get a nap before I go to the Christmas gathering where I'm going to meet stressful people? Well, then maybe I should get that nap, just taking care of ourselves so that we can be more virtuous.
Yes. And then can you touch a little bit on joy as well and why that's essential for every temperament?
It is. Our Lord tells us to rejoice always. He doesn't tell us to rejoice occasionally or make sure on Sundays that you sing some sort of praise and worship song. He says we are to rejoice always. And the only way we can do that is if we focus on Him, if we focus on what He has done for us, all the beautiful things that He's done for us, how much He loves us. Each of the studies of the temperaments should bring us back to that, like just bring us back around to how He is our joy. In the litany of the Sacred Heart of Jesus, there's a line, Heart of Jesus, source of all consolation. He is the source of all our consolation. So if we can keep bringing it back to Him. Now, again, like I said, it's not that we don't do those other things of getting together with our friends, taking a walk, taking a bath when we need it, that kind of stuff. But if we just always remember that it's all for Him and that He is offering us heaven. He is offering us the ultimate in joy, and that's where we're headed. As St. Therese said, this is not our home, this is a ship, right? We're just traveling towards our home.
So, Rosemary, then what would be the one takeaway you'd want people to have reading this book?
Ooh, the one takeaway. Basically, getting to know the saints. All right, let me rework that. I would say that everyone is destined for sanctity. Everyone. And we just have to find our path to his heart. So each of these saints gives us examples of different paths that they took to reach the heart of Christ. And that's what we can do too. We just look at their examples and we see who appeals to us and we see what little concrete tips in there apply to us. And we say, that's it. That's what I'm going to work on. We take one step, and our Lord reaches down to help us. Like we're a little toddler coming towards him. And he just reaches down and scoops us up in his arms like he did for St. Therese. So that's what it's all about. That's what we're doing here.
Yes. And he's just so ready to help us and to shower his graces upon us.
Oh, yes.
We have a very, very good Father.
Oh, yes. Yes.
Well, Rosemary, thank you for joining me and for sharing about your book. And I just encourage anyone out there who is curious about their own temperament style. Oh, actually, Rosemary, that leads me to another question.
Yes.
Where can people take an assessment or a test to figure out what their temperament might be?
Yes. So I recommend the Personality Plus one. You can find it in the book, Personality Plus by Florence Littauer, or you can just go online and Google that, and it will come up with the Florence Littauer Personality Plus temperament. The way that one quiz, the way that one works is they give you 4 words, and you choose which one applies to you most often. So it might be, well, once a week I feel that one. That one I never feel, and you just pick the one that is most often, and it helps to reflect. And the other thing about taking a quiz is that you want it to be what your natural tendency is, not what you've learned to do because you're a good Catholic adult now and you are virtuous. No, what your natural tendency would be. If nobody was making you, would you be out partying every day or would you be sleeping on the couch every day? Like what is it that your natural tendency is? And then that helps us to figure out where our strengths lie and what weaknesses we need to work on.
Okay, that makes sense. All right. Well, Rosemary, thank you again for joining, and thank you all for listening. And remember, when you say yes to God, you change the world. God bless you, and see you at the next episode. Goodbye.